We've already begun reaching out to witnesses. We're going to be noticing depositions or interviews as soon as next week. We're going to hold hearings as soon as we can. We expect subpoenas to go out, more subpoenas to go out first thing next week as well. So we're moving with all speed. I know that we're going to do everything we can to proceed methodically but swiftly. But we will expect that the administration is going to do everything they can to shut us down. When they do that, as they try to do that, every effort by the administration to slow us down will only add to the case against them for obstruction of Congress.
Adam Schiff wasn't kidding. As we just mentioned in the last few minutes, Mike Pompeo, United States Secretary of State, has been subpoenaed by 3 House committees. But taking a step back, it is amazing when you think about it. Less than 2 weeks ago, the Ukraine scandal was practically a White House secret, one the president and his advisors believed that they'd successfully locked down on a super secret classified computer system. But since then, it's exploded into one of the biggest political scandals in a generation. And now it seems the resulting impeachment inquiry will also move at lightning speed. New York Times reports this, quote, some lawmakers saying they could move within a month or 6 weeks, possibly drafting articles of impeachment by the end of October. Everybody is back. Let me, NBC News politics editor Mark Murray has a great tweet about because we live in these dog days where it feels like 7 months ago that this all started, but of course it wasn't. This week, Tuesday, formal impeachment inquiry announced. Wednesday, memo notes of the July 25th call released. Thursday, whistleblower complaint released. Friday, subpoenas sent, depositions set. Here we go.
Here we go. And I mean, you know, everybody complained, and I did too, that Speaker Pelosi was moving so slowly and that she was never going to get there at all. And what we've seen is that this really was a tipping point. Tipping point for a lot of Democrats. And now it's just like, let's just get it done. And I think they're going to do it, you know, at, I wouldn't say lightning speed, but it's going to be very careful, and it is going to be thorough. And the American people are going to have confidence, I think, in the process and the way that they do it. And that will be important because the Speaker likes to say all the time, public sentiment is everything. She always quotes Abraham Lincoln. And what she means by that is that her coming out helped to move the conversation, and now the evidence and the process has to move the conversation even more so that the American people collectively embrace the idea that we have to get rid of this unlawful president.
Well, and here's how public opinion has swung. Let me put up the latest polling data that we have. Politico Morning Consult. Should Congress begin impeachment proceedings to remove President Trump? September 20th. I think that was a week ago. I think the change is 43. There you go. There it is. Now 43% say yes, 43% say no. That's up 7 points. Huffington Post, should President Trump be impeached and removed from office? From earlier in September, up 3 points, 50% of respondents saying yes. And NPR, do you approve of the House formally starting an impeachment inquiry into President Trump? 49% say yes. Sam Stein.
You know, those are fairly remarkable numbers considering we are theoretically at the start of the process here.
3 days in, you know.
But, you know, on the flip side, I was talking to someone who's been a pro-impeachment advocate for a while now, and this person noted we have the data points. I mean, it's not like Watergate where you're waiting to find the tapes. We have the call
put them out.
Like Trump said, here you go. And so we, you know, a large section of the population has been primed for this. Now, you know, I think no one knows this answer, and certainly not me, is where does it go from here in terms of public opinion? Because we are in such a tribalized society, and our media ecosystems are so tribalized too, that if you believe that the president is being unfairly targeted, you're not going to get your news from the nightly news. You're going to get it from people that echo your viewpoint, and it's just going to affirm it and harden it. So, you know, those numbers, I don't know if they're a floor or a ceiling, but, you know, if you're the White House and you were banking on this being such a political winner, I guess I just don't see it at this point. It could change. I just don't see it right now.
And Mitt Romney doesn't see it either. I mean, I think when you look at public opinion, I always thought the most devastating thing for Hillary Clinton was that Bernie Sanders from the far, far left said the same things about her that Donald Trump said from the far, far right. And I've spent my career studying public opinion, and the most credible messages are the ones echoed from both sides of the political spectrum. So if independent voters, swing voters, the kind of voters that have fled Donald Trump since his elections, the ones that gave Democrats their big wins in the 2018 midterms, terms. If they see Mitt Romney saying the same thing as Nancy Pelosi, they're a whole lot more likely to believe it.
Well, you mentioned the echoes of Watergate earlier. Remember the Watergate impeachment proceedings? It was bipartisan. And Peter Rodino, who was the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee
It wasn't until it was. I mean, it wasn't for a very long time.
But he made it very, very clear that he was going to involve, he was going to reach out to those blue dog Democrats.
Yeah.
And ultimately, at the end of that story, it was Republicans. It was Republicans who really engineered the resignation of Richard Nixon. So far, it's only Romney. Romney is a lonely voice. Now,
Can I push back on that, though? I mean, I watched the hearing with McGuire yesterday. There was one Devin Nunes, and there were a lot more Congressman Hurds. I mean, there were a lot more people looking for information.
And this is what I think to watch for. Now, we have two Republican governors who've come out in favor of impeachment, which is significant. The governor of Vermont, the governor of Massachusetts. They're not members of the Senate. But you are having members of Congress who are willing to say, this is not acceptable behavior. And if you start to see other senators come forward and saying, without necessarily prejudging impeachment, but saying, this is not normal behavior, this is not acceptable behavior, you might begin to shift this dial and have people understand that this is not simply a partisan witch hunt, and that may actually happen.
You know, one thing that I think struck us all in that hearing was the fact that none of the Republicans who spoke out were actually defending the substance. Defending what happened on substance. They were going after leakers, you know, and everything else. They were not disputing the facts of the case. But the one thing that they did say afterwards was, well, this is a secondhand account. Correct? A secondhand account. And you heard that said a lot, even though the account eerily really mimics the transcript that the president now released. So it seems that this whistleblower really did have very good intelligence. However, I think it will be harder and harder for Republicans if these are public hearings and you bring forward these first person accounts.
Let me jump on that for a second. They all said to a person, when the memorandum of the call came out, there was no quid pro quo there, and that's fine. You can make that point. I don't agree with it, but it does set up a very big problem for them. There will be more documentation that's going to come forward. There are going to be requests for documentation from OMB about why the military aid was not released when it was supposed to be. If a quid pro quo is cleanly established in the forthcoming documentation, they are on the hook. Their own words are right there saying that's the standard that has to be met. At that point, it becomes very untenable for them to say, well, I was joking about the quid pro quo.
Well, here's the other thing that's untenable. The people who vouched for, I mean, I think that I heard the whistleblower's account is secondhand. Well, a first-hand account was verified by two of Donald Trump's appointees, the Inspector General at DNI, and the acting DNI. So two Trump appointees went in.
The White House today confirmed that they used a separate record-keeping system. So they are confirming parts of this complaint in real time. So.
And just keep an eye on Trump's Twitter feed. I'm sure we'll see all of it real quick.
Let's not forget that his transcript was a first-hand account that validated the whistleblower's complaint.
Pivots immediately from military aid to I have a favor. And by the way, I've talked to Democrats who are close to this investigation, and they say they also want the full transcript that may be in that vault, that password-protected vault, because there are a ton of ellipses after Trump's name, meaning that there were additional passages in there that either somebody maybe didn't want out or they didn't include for some reason.
And can we put a pen on Vice President Pence?
Please, and go ahead if you want to do more than that.
What I want to know is when he knew that he was not going to go to the inauguration, did he ask why?
Yeah.
Was he in the room when that was decided, and how was it decided? These are really important questions, and so there's a lot that we need to know about the vice president.
Well, and I'll say this about the vice president. He does put on different faces to different actors. I mean, he was largely believed by some sources to have been on John Bolton's side when he was fighting against having the Taliban at Camp David 2 days before 9/11. And then the story he told the press was thought by others to be a lie when he said, no, I was never against the president's grand plan to have the Taliban at Camp David. I mean, he does speak out of both sides of his mouth, which may catch up with him.
Well, in an investigation, there's a problem when you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth.
Can I just go back to Sam's point about the tribalization? You know, just keep in mind the note of caution. I don't want to throw a wet blanket over this. That this is ultimately not going to be decided by the facts and the testimony. It will be decided by the tribal loyalty and the narratives that the two sides tell. And keep in mind that if the House moves with lightning speed, the moment that they vote, they turn this over to Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell will then be the quarterback of what happens after this.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.